Okay, nice, excited to be here. Looking forward to talking to all of you about Gatsby. So first, show of hand, who here has heard of Gatsby before? Okay, it's a solid majority. Who here has used it in some fashion or another? Cool, it's about half of people. Awesome. So let's jump in. Okay, so first, kind of basic definition. Gatsby is a free and open source web framework based on React that helps developers build blazing fast websites and apps. And our goal is that you can approach building, whatever you want to use, build with React on the web with confidence. And kind of the idea is, React, when it was introduced, was famously like, hey, we're just a view. And largely speaking, that's true. Like, it's an incredible library, but the number of concerns that React covers is relatively small. And Gatsby's goal is to kind of help you with everything you else need to build a great website or app for the web. So a bit about me. So I'm the founder of the Gatsby open source project, and also Gatsby is now a company, and so I'm the CEO there. And my background is pretty CMS heavy. I built a lot of sites with Drupal as like a freelancer in the 2000s. And then kind of 2010s, I worked at Pantheon, a startup in San Francisco, on a Drupal, WordPress, kind of developer tools hosting company. And after doing a lot of CMS stuff, a lot of kind of did a lot of Backbone, jQuery, et cetera, back in the day, I got into React, and I wanted to start Gatsby because I fell in love with React, and I wanted to have a simple way to take React and the kind of the paradigm I love there and use it to build websites. And I open sourced that, and now 4 years later, there's tens of thousands of sites and apps built with Gatsby, and a really thriving ecosystem of contributors. So there's a number of sites you've probably seen that are building Gatsby, including the React docs, also like Impossible Foods, and a bunch of other sites. You can check them out at the showcase. And getting started with Gatsby is super simple. It's 3 steps. Install the CLI, and then you do Gatsby new to create a new site. And there's kind of a default starter, and then there's hundreds of starters that the community has created. So Gatsby can be used for all sorts of different things, like e-commerce, blogs, portfolio sites, marketing sites, almost anything you can imagine. And yeah, and then there's a develop server, Gatsby develop. So let's actually jump in and see what it's like. So go to the command line. So well, that's odd. Yeah, I ran git clean. That was a mistake. Okay. Luckily, the conference Wi-Fi is pretty fast. Okay, so we start the Gatsby develop command, and it goes through the bootstrap process. It starts Webpack dev server. Let me make that a little bit bigger still. Okay, and then we have a blog. Very nice. So this is the official blog starter, by the way. Okay, so this is a React app run by Gatsby, and you can click around. It has pages. These pages are created from Markdown files. So if you kind of look at, oh, that was too much. So these are all in the content folder, so content blog. If we open up our editor. Let me make this bigger too. So if we open up, Vim is fun. Okay, if we open up our editor to new beginnings, you can see the same Markdown file. Say new beginnings in Prague. You can save it, hot reloads. You can change the date to today. Happy Halloween. Voila, kind of changes up there. So you get hot reloading for, one of the goals of Gatsby is hot reloading is good, everything hot reloads. So this is a Markdown file. You can go to other Markdown files. like hello world, or actually, so this would be the hello world, you're great, etc. Okay, there it goes. So Gatsby has the idea of there's two ways to kind of add pages. There's kind of like standalone pages. So like the home page here is driven by this React component. And then each of the blog post pages are a template component like this. So if we go here to the title and we're like, the title, and save that, then it updates the template, for all the different blog posts, like so. Yeah. And so Gatsby, it uses React, obviously, and it also uses GraphQL to kind of fetch the data that's needed for all these pages. And so you can use, you can fetch data from all sorts of places. So this site uses Markdown, but Gatsby supports like hundreds of different sources, like basically anything with an API you can pull in data from. And the Gatsby community has created a bunch of source plugins to do this, which all use kind of Gatsby's GraphQL layer. So this is like the GraphQL query for the blog post template. So kind of a simple thing you can do is, this fetches the date from the Markdown field, and then you can like format the date. So if we change that, for example, then it modifies how we are rendering the year, like so. And if you use GraphQL, you've probably seen the GraphQL, which is the built-in GraphQL IDE. And that we include that with Gatsby because it's super useful for kind of working, figuring out which query you need. So a typical pattern is, you're like, I need a new page, and then you play around in GraphQL to figure out what the query you need, and then you create the page. And so Gatsby tries to make that really simple. So over here you can see all the different kind of types that are included, and each type has sort of a collection, a way of querying the whole collection. So for example, if you wanted to query every Markdown file, you could click on All Markdown Remark, and then you click on Nodes, and then you're like, I want to get the excerpt and front matter, title, and then time to read. And then you come over here and you click the run, and then that returns the data. So you can see like my second post, new beginnings in Prague, et cetera, et cetera. And this is all live, so it's like if you change the Markdown, then the query, whatever. And then we've included this code exporter. So you want to create a new page that's showing these. You just copy this generated page query. And then what you can do is you want to say, let's say you want to go my new page. And then Gatsby will say, oh, hey, there's no page there yet. But it tells you how to create it. So if you create a React component at source pages, my new page, then this will show it. So we can go pages / my new page.js. And then we just save this. And OK, there you go. And then you can like start modifying this. You can be like div my blog post, etc. And then let's say you wanted to link this from the home page. So you go back here, go here. And so Gatsby includes a link component, which is already imported on the index component from Gatsby. And so just after the bio, for example, you do link to that page, my new page. And then voila, you've added a new page to your site. Cool. So let's jump back in. Yeah, so earlier I said, if React is just a view, Gatsby is everything else. So what is the everything else that Gatsby adds to React.js? The first thing is, to build, to actually take your React components and build them into a form that you can deploy somewhere. You need a bundler, you need transpiler, you need probably support for TypeScript, support for CS options, a bunch of other stuff. And Gatsby provides, all these by default. We have a kind of a really bulletproof config that the vast majority of sites use and that we've extensively tested, so that it's as reliable, robust, as fast as possible, et cetera. And then, as you probably know, Webpack has a bunch of different ways of modifying it. And we've wrapped all these in Gatsby plugins, which there's now 1,400 of them, so that almost any imaginable type of modification you want to make to your build setup, you just install the plugin and off you go. Another great thing about Gatsby is hosting is really simple. What Gatsby sites don't require servers to run them. Which means that instead of having to provision and set up a bunch of sites, you can just use a kind of a static hosting provider like a CDN and run it for a fraction of the cost of a runtime SSR site. Which is great because CDNs that's their whole job, is to serve lots of files really fast. And so when your entire site's on a CDN, it solves a whole bunch of problems around running your site. So in general, we say you should prefer kind of serverless solutions like Gatsby does, where you kind of pre-render your React app versus runtime SSR, which is much more complex and costly. Kind of a simple example of this is Harrys.com, which is a shaver brand site. They launched a new women's brand, and on launch day, they built their new site with Gatsby. And on launch day, they got 10x their normal traffic, and then they told us that they were, nervous, anything going to break, something going to happen, whatever, and they didn't have to do anything. They had it on Fastly, and the site scaled without any problems, and it was really kind of peaceful. They just got to just be excited and watch it. Another thing Gatsby covers is SEO. So as you probably know, React, purely client-side apps have Google and others have trouble parsing those. And so Gatsby SSRs pages at build time so that your site is indexed as expected. Another great thing Gatsby does is loading data. It is kind of surprising to me that, just how much time just getting data onto a page can take. It's a remarkably complex problem. And Gatsby goes to great lengths to kind of automate that. So as we saw earlier with kind of the GraphQL layer. And you can hook up plugins for almost any sort of data source to pull in data. And then Gatsby automates loading that into the page. And so with a data layer, you have essentially no boilerplate, where you just have your component and then your query, and then we handle loading it in when it's needed. Another great thing about Gatsby is performance is baked in. So performance is a whole bunch of little things to get right. Stuff like code splitting, image optimizations, inlining critical styles, lazy loading, prefetching, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we spend a ton of time just researching what are the best practices and finding ways to automatically make that happen within Gatsby, so that all you have to do is write React components, and then we'll take care of making sure that that's fast without manual tuning, which a lot of systems require. So kind of a quick demo of this. If you go to gatsbyjs.org, and then if you load up the network tab, so I talked about prefetching, for example, and loading data. So one thing that Gatsby does is, as you kind of start rolling, so when these kind of links come up, we start prefetching the data needed for them. So now when you click on this, for example, everything needed to render that page is already in the client because we prefetched them. So kind of show that again. As we scroll down and start to get near some links, we pull in these page data for, page data ecosystem, click on that. instantly renders the new page because the data and the code has already been prefetched. And so by taking like your entire site and then like kind of like breaking up into little chunks, it makes sure that you're never loading too much when the page first loads. But by intelligently prefetching, as soon as you want to go to a link, your user isn't waiting for that to happen. Okay, so how does Gatsby happen? It's not just me, sneak peek. So 2 years ago, so I started the project 4 years ago and open sourced it and was really gratified by just the really strong interest from React developers all around the world. And I knew that I've done open source for a long time, and those of you who participate heavily in open source, it can be sometimes a thankless task. Like you have your job, and then you have your other job, maintaining your open source project. And I knew that Gatsby had the potential to be like a really massive project, and I knew it wasn't something I could do by myself. And so I wanted to make sure that Gatsby had like a strong kind of like business model behind it, so that both myself and other people that would be needed to kind of work on the project could have salaries to like work full time on it. It wasn't like a part-time thing, because I think great open source software requires a lot of dedicated time to make happen. And so my co-founder Sam Bhagwat and I, a couple years ago, we founded a startup to help grow Gatsby. And we raised money in order to do that. So far we've raised $18.7 million from a few different VC firms. And there's now 40 full-time Gatsby employees, with 15 of those working full-time on OSS. And we're seeking to model ourselves after, there's been a number of great OSS companies emerged over the last few years, like Elastic, Confluent, HashiCorp, and a bunch of others. And what they've done is, married building an amazing, inclusive OSS ecosystem, and providing also like cloud services with lots of customers to kind of like fund the whole thing. And our goal is that, with the community, that everyone feels like they belong, that it's we go to great lengths to provide great documentation, so like anybody can get started with Gatsby, and we also try to enforce code of conducts. We have commitment to accessibility, and do a lot of things so that people can get started with Gatsby, can contribute, and feel safe. Yeah, I've been really gratified to see all the people that have gotten involved and made great contributions. Yeah, and so I kind of already covered that. So we're investing a lot of money to grow Gatsby, and we think that like this marriage between OSS and commercial can create kind of like a virtuous cycle. That the revenue from the business can fund development, and then kind of the things that we learn through participation in the OSS community can feed a lot of what we're doing with the company. And that these can really complement and fuel each other. So a common question we get asked is like, well, okay, so your business, like how does that actually work? Like how do you make money? What's your business model? And the answer is basically cloud infrastructure and collaboration tools. So this is very similar in a lot of ways what we're doing to like Site or Netlify, Heroku, AWS, kind of other like cloud technology providers, but specifically for Gatsby. And we're in process of launching stuff, but we'll have like a generous free tier for everyone to use, and for experimentation, small sites, and then charge commercial users as they kind of scale up their usage of the cloud tools. And so our first product has been out in open beta for a few months. It's called CMS Preview. And this is basically content hot reloading for content authors and marketers. So if you know how useful it is, like while you're developing code, to see hot reloading, the same thing is true of for content authors. Because like if you're editing like a complex data model, it's nice to see how it's going to affect the site. So let me give a quick demo of that. So this is our dashboard here. And so you can open up, hopefully this is working. Okay, so let me do this real quick. Too many tabs. There it is. Okay, So if you edit the title, for example, is this going? OK, it's working. In Prague. So yeah, so imagine you're like a content editor, and you're just going around the site, and you're like, OK, I want to edit a project, not at the London Gatsby meetup, at ReactiveConf. And then you can say, upload different images, just screenshots. So anyway, so it's like hot, it's kind of like live reloading as you go. Yeah, and so we have like 60-ish customers now. So people using Gatsby sites, and they want to give their kind of CMS authors a great experience. OK, so close that. And then we're also working to solve kind of build time for sites, or building sites, and particularly around how to make Gatsby scale to very large sites. And if you've used Gatsby, particularly for sites with thousands of pages, like build times can get slow. And what this means is that it can both be like annoying to use if your site's larger, but also maybe just like straight up impossible. Like if you have a site that has, say, 100,000 pages, it's just not possible to kind of like pre-render that entire site in any reasonable amount of time. But we're working to solve that. And this is a super hard problem. It's kind of, a lot of people say it's like the holy grail of static sites, but we're feeling pretty confident we've cracked it. The basic idea is, Gatsby, like all build processes, you have like a bunch of work, and you do it sequentially. And the idea of what we're doing, what we're building in our cloud product, is we take that build process and kind of like split it apart and run it across hundreds of servers. So this sort of illustration of the difference between like a normal build and a cloud build is your normal build, it's like sequential, step by step by step. And then a cloud build, we parallelize stuff immediately. And then in subsequent builds, we can like eliminate doing a lot of kind of like repetitive work, because like we'll have a really fine-grained caching so that we only have to do the build steps that are necessary, which is like leads to a dramatic speed up. And this will be part of, it'll be like a hosted service, running on our cloud infrastructure. And we'll be launching this in the coming months. And it's going to be pretty amazing. We think that even very large sites will rebuild very quickly. Yeah, and in summary, it's like what we're trying to do in general with Gatsby again is help you build, help you take React, like kind of the paradigm of React, and use it to build any sort of web property with confidence. Whether that's like kind of traditional CMS type websites or like really sophisticated apps. Gatsby has all the React kind of everything you need around React to make that happen. And particularly, we're bringing React to the CMS world, because most people are still using like WordPress and Drupal and hundreds of other different different types of CMSs. And Gatsby lets you use React with those CMS and vault them into the modern app world. And yeah, so invite you to come build your sites with Gatsby. Thanks for having me.
Don't go anywhere, because I warned Kyle that you guys are not going to ask that many questions since he's the first speaker and you probably are a little tired still, but that's not true. There's so many of them. So could Gatsby include TypeScript support by default? That's the first question.
Yeah, so that's something that's requested a lot. So right now, Gatsby has a plugin for TypeScript, but a lot of people want it kind of built out of the box. And yeah, one of the core maintainers is working on an issue to kind of gather requirements for that. And it's something, yeah, we could ship pretty soon, actually.
How Gatsby decides how to split code and when lazy load bundles?
Yeah, so we ship by default page or kind of route-based code splitting. So every type of page, a single page or like a template page gets its own bundle, and so that generally takes care of a lot of performance problems. It kind of so if you have like a really big JavaScript template And like one of your subpages, that code that you need there is only loaded if you visit that page. And you can also do code splitting like within your page component if you want to like lazy load like a big widget or something that most people don't need.
Does the prefetching automatically turn off for mobile, or it always on? Data is not always cheap.
Yes, this is a great point. So we try to be as conservative as possible while still driving a great experience. Our main solution for this is that most browsers support like a data saver mode, and so we respect that. So if somebody doesn't want to use extra data, then we don't. We turn down prefetching a lot. But as you saw in the performance demo too, we only prefetch when we're pretty confident that somebody is going to click on a link. So generally speaking, we're not loading a lot of data.
How about Gatsby and microservices?
We support it. So Gatsby fits very well in kind of like the serverless microservices paradigm, where you have a client app that's talking to different backend APIs. So a lot of people use that very successfully. I mean, on gatsbyjs.com, like this is how we're building everything with microservices.
We go to 2 last questions. Can you use Gatsby with REST for dynamic pages with all the advantages like prefetching?
Yep, absolutely. So Gatsby's data layer, it's pretty straightforward to hook it up to any sorts of API, and you can trigger building your pages with that.
And what are your plans for the new features and feature development of Gatsby?
We have tons of plans. Yeah, I mean, we have a big team working on stuff. So a lot of our focus is just in general, like improving the developer experience, helping scale up Gatsby builds, making your sites faster and faster. So we have a lot of optimizations coming. And what's cool about what we're doing is that all of this is like we're shipping within. We've been on like V2 for the last year, and we just keep shipping new improvements. So kind of the overall goal is that you start building your site with Gatsby, and then we'll just make it faster and better as time goes on.
Kyle, that's all the time we had for the questions right now. But Kyle will be today at 5 p.m. at the Discover stage as a part of our chat zone, so you can ask some questions there directly. Thank you so much. So this was Kyle Mathews, again, the creator of Gatsby.
Yeah.